Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Salim. Um, I'm the director of Smart Light, and for those who have been joining on a regular basis, you will know that this is a series of workshops we are doing in our capacity building program. We are developing the skills and knowledge of individuals and organizations of all sizes to help them to understand how to make the most out of this digital world that we are working and living in now. So today's workshop is a really exciting one. I'm quite looking forward to this. You may have heard in the news that COVID restrictions are all going to be eased very, very shortly, which means there's no mandatory mask wearing, no social distancing. People can voluntarily wear their mask, but it's not a mandatory at all, which means that more and more services are now going to be opening up, and you will start finding that things will start getting very, very busy. So, as part of that, this workshop today is absolutely vital. As we start easing back into our normal lives, we'll be getting out and about more. We'll be doing more around networking and meeting people all the time. So today's workshop is quite timely, and it's going to be talking about how you can best develop your networks and the partnerships you have. These two are absolutely vital. We all have networks and we all have partnerships. And a lot of people may not even be aware that they are part of a network and a partnership. So, what we're going to do today is simplify all this. Andy will explain to you the importance of partnerships and networks and how best you can develop those. Something that we all need to understand a little bit more. So, without much further ado, I think you're all familiar with Andy. He was delivering our workshop last week. Andy's an expert in learning and development. Always hates it when I say this to him.
I was going to say allegedly. You forgot allegedly.
Okay, Andy's allegedly an expert. Now he is a very, very good person to know in this field, and Andy has helped us enormously, and the people we have in developing the work people through the workshops that we've been delivering. So, without much further ado, I will hand over to Andy. The recording has started, so we are recording this. Please keep your videos off if you feel uncomfortable about that. It's not an issue. Keep your mics off until it's time to answer some questions. So, over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Most appreciated. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this here session. I think Salim's covered most of that in there in the introduction, which is great. But this afternoon, what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time talking to you about some of the different tools that you can use to develop networks, some of the different techniques that we can use, and also try and identify some of those barriers sometimes that get in the way of us either using the networks that we've got or, prevent us from creating those greater partnerships networks that we could have in order to further our own businesses or our own development or whatever that might be. So there's a bit of a variety of different things that we're going to be looking at as part of this session. So in more detail, what we'll be covering is one, looking at the contacts you've already got. So we haven't made it to this point by not meeting people or not working with others or identifying, those that can help us within our own network. So we'll have a look at our existing contacts and we'll think about how we can leverage some of those existing networks so that it can enhance both, additional networking opportunities or that it can enhance those business opportunities for us. So we'll look at, what we can do with some of those things and some of the barriers that can get in the way of us doing that as well. We'll have a brief look at some different online tools that you can use to help, build more effective partnerships, either with other organizations, with other individuals, but we'll look at how we can develop, increased work opportunities for the future. And we'll look at how perhaps in some places you might find there's unexpected benefits of using some platforms that are already out there or you might already be part of, to think about how you could grow things that little bit further and that little bit more as well. One of the big things that I do want to spend some time looking at is probably the third point on there, which is about being prepared to give back as well as receive. And I think often when we look at how I'm going to further business, and certainly, when I started working for myself, and I created my organization, one of the things from us was we were very much on how do we grow, what can we do, how do we, start and get that business in, and how do we, move forwards with that. But it became really, apparent to me quite quickly that the more I supported others and the more I could give back, actually, growth happened organically as a result of that. So we're going to have a look at how we enhance relationships in that way and how we can grow things through there as well. And then the final piece that I want to leave you with is a little bit around, becoming the storyteller. So the good news is I'm not going to expect us to, meet with people and start and read novels and things like that. But certainly think about how we actually tell the story about who we are, who our organization is, what it is that we want to achieve, how we can help others, how they might be able to help us, and think about how we go through that full process of really laying out, that complete end-to-end process. So we will look at storytelling as we come towards the end of this module. Now, one of the things for any of you that's been on a session with me before will be aware of is that I'm not a massive fan of just sitting talking at you. So there will be a couple of points in this where I'll ask a couple of questions as we go through the session. So one of the things that I'm going to do is kick off with a question. So I'll throw this open to everybody that's on the call. And the first couple of questions I want to know are sort of, one, how do you work with your current networks? So what are the kind of things that you're doing with them already? What's positive about some of the relationships that you've got and some of those, business networks? How, what works really well for you? And actually, in a perfect world, what would be the things that could be different? So I'd just be really keen to get your view and your input, on the answer to some of those questions. So if anybody would like to lead us off with, how do we work with our current networks, or what's positive about those relationships, that'd be great.
Actually, Andy, I'd like to come in here if that's okay first.
Absolutely, go for it.
Because this is really, really important, this point, because the one thing I personally do, and I'm sure a lot of people fall into the same category, is that when you're starting to develop your networks, your networks are growing,
mm-hmm.
but then you start splitting them up into your personal networks and then into your professional work networks, or the ones you work with. And then you have so many different levels of networks. This person I only speak with because of this reason, that person I'll speak to because of that reason. And I have difficulties in trying to segregate or split the different networks up that I have.
Yep.
And they tend to overlap as well sometimes. So that becomes difficult trying to maintain them.
Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because they can overlap. And I think that's the beauty of a network, is that it's so interconnected and you've got people in so many different places. But sometimes it can be hard to think, well, who is it that's the go-to person for this thing or for that thing? And actually, should I be asking someone that's in a personal network of mine, or should it be more just business oriented? What could happen to that relationship from there? So yeah, absolutely. So that crossover and that kind of thing. And we're going to look at that actually when we get into sort of, what some of the barriers that stop us from using some of those networks. So that's a really good point on that one, in terms of things that play in this. Thanks for that. That's great.
The other thing I'd just like to mention at this stage is also that in terms of the positivity about the relationship, there is a lot of positivity in the respect that when I start looking at the different networks, suddenly, one day I might need someone who has a specific skill set.
Yep.
So, for example, like the other day, we had a personal problem in the house, and there was a plumbing issue, and I needed someone who was a plumber.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to access very quickly someone who could do that. Then when it comes to work related, again, this week, I desperately needed to get some printing done. And so I've got about 4 contacts who are printers, and I was able to speak to all of them very, very quickly.
Excellent.
So when you've actually got that understanding as to, exactly where to go within your networks, then you realize that you can do things very quickly and save time.
Absolutely. You can really, that saving time, and that being able to act more efficiently and more effectively absolutely gives you a boost, doesn't it? Because you can just get things resolved, get things moving. There's no need to become stuck or hung up on any one thing. So yeah, absolutely. So that's a massive element of, the positivity that sits behind this. So yeah, some really great points that's in there. Has anybody else got some other thoughts around sort of, how we work with our current networks, or things that they'd like to change, or things they'd like to develop?
I think we've got a shy group today, Andy.
That's quite all right. We can be shy. We'll try again in a couple of slides' time. So let's not worry. So if, by all means, you don't have to, speak out on some of these bits. But what I'd encourage you to do, particularly as we get into this next bit, though, is just keep those questions in mind and think about how you do work with your current networks. Think about what works really well for you. But then think about that wish list. Yeah. So grab hold of that wish list and think about what is it that you'd like to change? What could be different? Because if you can hold on to that as we go through on the session, you'll find a couple of different things that you may be able to use as we work through the program. Now, one of the things that, can get in the way sometimes, and I think Salim just made the point there around having some of that crossover in our network, is that sometimes, our business network or professional network starts to cross over into our personal lives, or because we start to build more of a personal relationship with people. And that sometimes can prevent us from working with people in a business context. And some of the barriers that we might come up against, we mentioned, at the start, we'd look at some of these barriers, but some of those are on screen now. In the, starting from the left-hand side, though, we think about achieving and not doing. So a lot of the time, one of the big barriers we put in place is we constantly think about what the end result's going to be. So we think about, what's the target I've got for myself? What is it when I've achieved it? And because we think about that target, we don't actually take action. We don't move anything forward. We cease to do something. So one of the things that we need to think about is am I just setting actions, or am I setting targets for what I'd like to achieve with my network, or am I actually doing something to implement it? And I'm willing to bet if we find that we're standing still, 9 times out of 10 it's because we're too focused on what that target is rather than actually taking positive action. The next point talks about emotional attachment. And what we mean by this is that it could be someone that you've developed, a really close personal friendship with. Yeah. So it ceased to be somebody that I network with, but actually now we're friends. We see each other socially. We have conversations with each other about family, about other, sort of personal life related issues, things like that. And sometimes that can get in the way because I know them on a personal level. Maybe I feel a little bit awkward asking them for some support as far as my business or my organization is concerned. Maybe I don't necessarily, maybe I'm going to shy away from involving them in my work life because actually I quite like my personal life and my work life kept separate. But one of the things to think about is what could they do to benefit you? Are you stuck on a particular problem? Are you stuck in a particular place? And actually they could have the key. So it's worthwhile remembering that whilst we've got that emotional attachment, we can absolutely use that as a strength and not as a barrier to preventing us moving forward. The middle one, around not recognizing our own value. Sadly, I see this all too often in people where we lose sight of what it is that I do that's great, or I lose sight of, my skill set, my strengths, my abilities. I'm unable to sort of articulate clearly what it is that I'm brilliant at, and then what I can bring to a relationship. And we seem to rely on other people. So there is a need for us to recognize our own value and recognize what it is that we bring to the party. Sometimes we ask what if far too many times. I'm a big fan of a what if question, but I'm a big fan of it when it's used in the right way. What I mean by that is that when we use it incorrectly, it tends to be, what if it goes wrong? What if I don't get the result I'm looking for? What if the person says no? What happens if I don't achieve what it is I've set out to? When we start to ask what if in that context, it becomes really negative. And that's where we start to find ourselves falling down that negative mind talk spiral. And we get into a place where actually I'm never going to leverage a relationship, or I'm never going to be able to grow my network because I'm too busy focused on what might go wrong. Yeah, I'm focusing on everything that might not work with that relationship or within that network. If I ask what if in the right way, so what if it works out? Well, it'll bring this result. What if somebody says yes? What if I can work with them to achieve a bigger result? What does that do for my overall level of achievement? So the more we can put that positive spin on the same question, we can find that we can grow things really well. We can become massively successful because we've taken that action in terms of focusing more positively on what it is that we can do. And then the final one's around striving for perfection. That can hold people back so many times, in the sense that I won't actually move this forward because it's not perfect just yet. It's not exactly how I need something to be. I could help somebody, but I can only get them 90% of the way there. So until I can get them 100% of the way there, I'm going to stay quiet. Or unless I can answer 100% of their questions that they're going to ask me, I'll just keep my hand down and I'll remain a little bit closed off. But sometimes getting people half of the way there is enough. People can actually get themselves across the line, themselves. If we can help them halfway, they will absolutely want to dive in and do the other half for themselves. So there's a flip side to all this, which you can see on screen now. Yeah, so let's change our focus to doing. Let's stop just setting targets and let's stop just thinking about what a bigger network would look like and actually do something about it. All of you have taken positive steps because you're on this call today. Yeah, so we've all decided we're going to do something about this. We're actually not just going to set a target anymore about growing a network. We're going to do something physical and we're actually going to get ourselves into a space where I can start and grow that network. So that's really positive. So celebrate that and use that as a positive step forward. Think about wide benefits. Think about the benefits that you can bring, not just to yourself, but also to those personal connections as well. If you can remember on the previous slide, we were talking about emotional attachment and how sometimes that can get in the way. Well, imagine if you could bring a massive positive improvement to somebody else's life because of what you can offer from a business point of view. But the benefits swing both ways. This is not just about what you bring, but also what they can bring to it as well. And both of us could grow and both of us could benefit. Thirdly, recognize you've got a lot to offer. Remember we said about not, recognizing your own value. You're in business or you're working for an organization in your chosen specialist area because there's a hell of a lot that you can bring. You've got so much that you could offer in any particular scenario. So recognize that, remember it, and use it. I mentioned about the what if questions and about, phrasing it more positively, and that's one part to it, but take some smart risks. At the absolute worst, if you try to grow your network within any other organization or with another business, at the absolute worst, it just won't come off. And that's all, that's fine. So we're going to try somewhere else and we'll grow with something else and we'll find another route and we'll try somewhere different that we can grow it. But if we never take that risk, if we never take that opportunity, I can guarantee to you that you will remain stuck. You will absolutely stay in place and will not find things move forward. So it's important that we take those smart risks. And then the final point is recognizing that if we support and work with others, we'll all achieve more. Yeah, so this isn't just what's in it for me, but it's also what I can bring to others as well. Let's be honest, if we look at this session today, this session's about, how we're going to develop networks, how we're going to develop partnerships, how we're going to work with other people, and that's great. And you'll all get something that you can take away from this one. But I'll be honest, it benefits me, in terms of running this session as well. This is what I do for a living. So it really benefits me in terms of helping you. So if I can help you, you guys are benefiting me by being on this call. So there's real achievement there for both of us as we go through this session today. So rather than getting hung up on, should I leverage that relationship or not, start and use that positive slant on that what if question and think about what if you did and what that positive next result could be. So start and think a little bit more in that space and how we can use that. So we can do that by generating a win-win. As we've said there, what assistance can be there for both parties? Look at what you can learn from one another. So think about how can I help you and what can I take back from you as well. Yeah, so how does this work? You've already seen Salim and I having a conversation at the start of this call, both of us sharing ideas back and forth around that first slide. I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen when I ask a question in any one of these sessions because I never know how someone's going to answer. I never know, what type of information is going to be in the answer or even if there will be an answer. But that's absolutely fine because what I am aware of is that we can both learn from one another. We can both get something out of it. And actually, if I don't ask the question, then I run the risk of letting an opportunity pass me by. So I might not learn from my group. I might not learn what I could do differently next time. Now, I'm not prepared for those opportunities to disappear. The final 2 points that's on there, if we think about that win-win, and we think about leveraging that, existing relationship, think about shared challenges. Sometimes it can feel, particularly if we're facing a problem, be it with work or within our organization or whatever we're trying to do, that I'm the only person that's experiencing this. I'm the only individual that's struggling in that space. Well, actually, if we talk a little bit more openly and we start to, learn from other people, we'll identify that actually we've got some challenges in common, and that we can both, as separate parties, try to work that through. We can, push forward on our own, and see that's, quite difficult to do. Or the two of us could join together and actually take some action, as a joint entity, and really push forward on this. And we can overcome these challenges, and we could achieve so much more by being stronger together. And then the final point as well is, whenever we're starting to look at working with somebody, is reference previous history and success. Look at what's gone well before. What experience have you gained? What experience have you gathered throughout your years in work, or, a bit through study, through your personal life, whatever that might be? What have you done that's worked, and how can we utilize that, in a really positive sense within, other networks, with other people, and show them how we can achieve those levels of success? If we can remember those 5 points, we can identify that when I'm growing my network, when I'm developing my partnership, it's not just about me, it's also about the other party that I'm working with. And between the two of us, we can absolutely achieve a whole lot more. So to do it, the thing we need to think about is right, I'm going to develop my network. What am I going to do? So let's start with one of the obvious solutions that we can use online, and that's LinkedIn. Just as a quick one, would anyone like to shout out if they are on LinkedIn? I am. I'm available on there. Salim, are you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well, Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. So there's a few of you others on the call. I'm willing to bet that at least one of you is on there, because I did some stats research before this session, and I found this, that worldwide, LinkedIn's got around about 756 million users. Now, that's an incredible number. That's absolutely huge in terms of the number of people that are available on that one platform. Out of that 756 million, 310 million people use it at least once a month. Yeah, so think about that number. That's 310 million contacts are on there every single month. And out of that 310 million, about 250 million of those are decision makers in a business. So they can absolutely say yes or no to the offer that you're putting through. Now, personally, when I was looking at that, I knew LinkedIn was big, but those figures are astounding. Yeah, they're absolutely huge in terms of what that looks like. But then what I wanted to do was just find out a little bit more about what people actually do with it. And what I've found is that most people just read content from others. They might give something a like, or maybe a round of applause. Or they'll hit the auto-populated option to just congratulate people on a new job or promotion. Do any of you recognize that as actions that you do on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm afraid, Andy, that is me as well.
Yeah,
when I first joined LinkedIn, I was encouraged to join by another business contact of mine, and so you really need to be on this platform because of the work that we were doing and I was doing. And so when I first joined, I was like, I was scared to post anything.
Yeah.
I was actually afraid, thinking all the time. It's going back to that slide. I kept thinking, what if? What if? I was saying, what if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? What if somebody doesn't like what I put on there? And you always start off being very, very scared and very negative on anything. And that's almost the same with when you start first time on Twitter, you start first time on Facebook. What if it's going to be Instagram? You keep saying, what if, what if, what if? So it all resonates very, very well, this does.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And I just think, particularly when you look at LinkedIn, when you look at those numbers and you think about the size and scale of the network, that you've got available to you on there. So there is, millions of people available. Each one of those could become a contact. You can reach out to any single one. The beauty of LinkedIn is that it doesn't, segregate people into different categories. So you can't talk to this group, or they're a premium member, so I'm afraid you can't speak to premium members. But none of that happens. You can talk to whoever you want on it. You can reach out to whoever it is, that you want to make contact with on there. And when you look at that 250 million people having decision-making responsibility, that's vast as well. So that's a massive amount of people that can actually decide whether or not they're going to work with us. So the potential for it is absolutely vast. But Tony, to your point, you're absolutely right. If we ask what if in that negative fashion, what if I put content on there that nobody reads? That was the thing that held me back for so long. What if I put content out there and nobody looks at it? Well, if you put content out there and nobody looks at it, you then know it doesn't work. So the answer to that is, well, that's a positive outcome, because I now know I need to do something different, with my communication. So there's no real negative to it in that particular sense, but it's about experimenting with these things and recognizing that there's a massive resource at your fingertips. And it's not just about looking at, what's going on in other people's networks, how much success somebody else is, enjoying. It's about sort of exploiting that for yourself. You are absolutely, welcome to be part of that community and share what you want. But it's about thinking about how you can start and influence that and putting different messages out there, different communications out there from yourself, from your organization, whatever that might be, to help people recognize that you really do know your stuff. You're in a place where you can absolutely benefit others and you can absolutely grow things for other people as well. So definitely worth thinking about as far as LinkedIn's concerned, and thinking about how you're going to use that to move your particular business or organization forward. The next thing as well is to then look at some of the areas that we might not readily recognize as things that can help grow our business. I put Facebook right at the top primarily because I was about to say I've got an interesting story, but I think it's interesting, so I'll share it with you and then you can make your own mind up. Facebook is incredibly powerful, and again, you've got more members than you've got on LinkedIn. There's a whole variety of different ways in which you can interact with Facebook, be it from your professional business page to your own personal profile, whatever that might be. But some Facebook groups can absolutely bring unintended benefits. I'd like to share an example of that with you. So, in my own life, I am a camper van driver. I rather enjoy driving camper vans. I like going camping. I like doing that kind of stuff. So I joined a camper van club on Facebook, just so that I can find out some more information from other people. Now, when I needed some work doing on the camper van, I reached out to that club to see if anybody could recommend someone to talk to me about, I think it was a woodworking project. Actually, I wanted some new countertop stuff done. And they put me in touch with somebody else, and it turns out they're a joiner. Which is brilliant, which is why they're in a great place to do that. But now I have a joiner contact that I can use for any home repairs that I might have going on. At the same time, while we were talking to them, it's somebody that needed some assistance with some video editing, which is something that I do. So that helped me grow my network there in that way. Now, the Facebook group we were both members of was about camper vans. It had absolutely nothing to do with growing our businesses. It had absolutely nothing to do, with what we did professionally at all. But what it has done is put us in touch with other people just by reading and paying attention and thinking about things in a different way. So it's well worth thinking about how you can leverage some of those groups you're in and identify that some of those personal contacts can really help you. Another one that's a newer one on the market, but I do think it's a great tool, is called Shaper Networking. Now, it says professional network matchmaking. So just to put some caveats around this is not a dating site. But it does operate very similar in that you can swipe left or swipe right, depending on whether or not somebody is right for you in your network. And you can arrange meetings with them virtually and face-to-face if you want, where you can discuss, what your organization does, what their organization does, and think about any joint opportunities that there might be to grow, your own businesses. So Shape is an interesting one to start and have a look at, and something a little bit different to LinkedIn, or thinking about different things in a different way. And then the final one to mention is Eventbrite. So, the session that we're on today was advertised by Eventbrite, but Eventbrite itself opens up a massive world of possibilities. When I was looking through it a couple of weeks ago, when I was thinking about this session, and the kind of things that we'd be talking about, I found everything on there from, being a professional chef, all the way through to going visiting a Ministry of Defence site for the day on an open day if I wanted to, through to looking at different colleges, to understanding, different languages that I might want to learn to speak. So many different things on there that I could do to develop myself, where I will be opening myself up to meeting different people from different walks of life, from different areas, where I get to find out so much more about what's on offer and what other things are going on. So I personally believe that, we're now about to enter a world where, hopefully we're going to start and see things open up again, and that's great. So we can get back to face-to-face networking. But even using some of the online tools that are available to us, we'll find ourselves in a place where there's no excuses for keeping the small network that I'm used to having, and I'm going to be able to grow things that little bit further as we go through. Okay. And we mentioned at the start that sometimes it's not just about receiving. Quite often when we reach out to a network, it's because we need something to happen for us. So it's about thinking, what is it that makes me unique? What makes me different? And how do people benefit from what I do? So we need to think a little bit around sort of, what is it I can do for other people? So perhaps you've seen examples of where individuals are reaching out for help and support. So let's use, LinkedIn. I see it on there all day, every day. People asking, does anybody know someone who can? I'm looking for someone who will be able to. Now, even if you can't provide that exact service, what makes you different is that you've got a completely different network to somebody else. So you might be able to connect two people together. Now, connecting those two people together doesn't instantly grow your business. It doesn't instantly give you that satisfaction of things moving on within your own organization. But what it does do is it highlights the fact that you are somebody that knows others who can help, and you are there ready to assist and support other people. I've done it by supporting local education organisations from schools, universities and colleges, where sometimes I've been able to help, but on other occasions, people have reached out to me, do I know someone who could assist them? And because of that, I've grown my network as a result. So it's not just about what I can do for others, or, about receiving, business opportunities from others, but it's thinking about what else I can do to push things forward. So some questions just for you to take a moment and think about. So similar to the questions at the start of the session, take away from this and think about, what makes you unique, what's going to make you different, and how do people benefit from what you do? And all of that feeds into that value that we can bring to other people as well. So constantly keep hold of the answers to those questions, because the more you recognize your own value and worth, the easier it is to grow, your own network, your own partnerships, and your businesses as a result. So just some examples just to round off on that piece here that's on screen now for you. So some of the things that we could do to give a little, we could volunteer. So maybe, you might be running a charity of your own, right? And normally you're looking for people to volunteer with you. Perhaps there's something you could do to volunteer with others. So if I volunteer with you, could you volunteer with me? And there's that win-win scenario again. Recognizing that a return on investment is more than just a financial incentive. The value that we create for other people, be it through, increased confidence, can be so much more, than generating income or profit for somebody. So really identify what it is, that people are wanting as a result. What does a return on investment look like for others? And if it's not financial, what's the other benefit that we could bring to any scenario? This third one down is one that I labour the point on in many different sessions, but around listening first, and about actively listening to what's being said to you. All too often, I get involved in conversations with people where about, 5-10 seconds in, I'm well aware that they're not actually listening to what I'm saying. All they're doing is waiting for me to stop talking so that they can actually put their point of view across. And wherever that occurs, I'll be honest, I'm less inclined to work with anybody like that, because ultimately I want to be understood. I want you to really actively listen to what's being said to me and understand the position I'm in. So that listen first is critical. So whilst it might be, tempting to really dive in with your own offer or your own business idea or suggestion first, take time instead to step back and listen to what others have got to say. I can guarantee the more you listen, the bigger your network will become, because people are happy to have someone who's there to receive what it is that they're saying. And the final part of it, solve the problem. If somebody's got an issue, if somebody's flagged, that they've got a concern, a problem, whatever that might be, whether you've seen it on LinkedIn, Facebook, whether you've seen it at a face-to-face networking event, whatever it might be, if you've got a solution to something for somebody, say so. If you can demonstrate that you can take positive action and resolve a scenario for somebody, they are more likely to listen in the future and more likely to want to work with you and become part of your network. And you'll identify growth through that methodology as well. So the final bit that I want to look at today is just around storytelling. So again, just a couple of questions. I'll fire these ones out there. If you haven't got a ready answer for it, don't worry, but just bear these ones in mind as we go through the next slides. But if I was to say storytelling as a phrase or a term, what does storytelling mean to you? And what are the key elements of a story? So has anybody got any thoughts or opinions on that one?
Andy, this word storytelling actually
Yep.
is starting to come up quite often now,
Hmm.
and even I struggle to understand what it is, because when you look at the word storytelling, um, it's it's like two words put together to make up one word. When you
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where my confusion is, because when you look at the word story, a story is normally like a book, and a
Yep.
book is something you read.
Yep.
So that's where the confusion has been coming to me. And I always think, when you're storytelling, are you story reading? Are you story listening? But storytelling, I'm waiting to hear what you're saying about what storytelling actually is. But with the story,
Hmm.
I always remember being taught, and this is what I teach a lot of people, is with a story, there's always three bits. There's the
Hmm.
beginning, there's the end, and there's the middle bit.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I can remember about stories.
No problem. That's
And I don't
all
know if
fine.
anyone else on the group might be able to share something more. They probably read more storybooks than I do as well.
Any other thought? Anybody got anything else they want to throw in there around storytelling? No? Okay. Well, let's have a look at it and see what we mean in a little bit more detail then. So hopefully, Simon, will get to some of the things that sit behind it. So you're absolutely right. A story has got a beginning, a middle, and an end. When we look at creating a story, or when we look at sort of creating how we're going to tell a story to somebody, we actually break it into these 5 sections here. So 5 C's. So we've got context, we've got conflict, there's a climax to a story, we close the climax off, and then we conclude it and we tie up all of the loose ends at the other end. So let's think about what that storytelling could mean in terms of, growing a network, because you're absolutely right. Normally a story is found in a book, and normally we read it. But a good storyteller is somebody that will stand there and quite happily tell you a story. They will happily narrate to you and speak to you about what it is that they can offer. So from a networking perspective, when we talk about telling a story, it breaks down like this. So when we talk about context, this is thinking about giving some background information. So don't just offer solutions. So as an example, as a learning and development professional, I do e-learning design. Let's just use that as an example, is that I can design e-learning programs. If I stand up at a networking event and say, hello, I'm Andy, I design e-learning programs, doesn't really mean anything to anybody. But I could provide context, and I could start to reference how actually I can reach remote learners, those learners that work from home permanently, or those learners that are unable to make it into the office, or people with different needs around development or need additional levels of support. That's where I come in because of what I can offer. So it's that context around the background of it. What is it about your business, about you, about your organization? Give me the background information first so I understand where this message is going to come from. The next thing's about conflict. When we talk about conflict, we're not necessarily talking about a battle or an argument, but we're thinking about what that narrative is going to be. So what's the challenge that somebody needs to overcome? What's the obstacle that's in the way? What's the kind of thing that they might find in their business? So let's keep with that e-learning example that I've referenced earlier on. So for me, the obstacle in the way could be that people aren't able to come into the office. Yeah, something that we've all seen over the last 2 years of the COVID pandemic is that people can no longer travel into the office. We can't bring groups of people together. So that's a challenge that you may be facing in your organization. The impact of that, so as we get into the climax, so this is the third point down, the impact of that is that from a development point of view, people are losing the skills that they need to be able to work successfully in your business. Now, what I can do to help is that I can create a remote e-learning package that means people are constantly being given the right skills. So I've demonstrated to you where your challenge is, and now I've shown to you how I can help you overcome it. When we talk about tying up the loose ends and demonstrating that value and that return on investment, I'm starting now to talk about how it's a low-cost option. I'm starting to talk about how reporting is in place, assessment can be in place for that. This is how, as a business, if you follow my e-learning methodology, you'll be able to understand that people have got the right skill set, they're in the right place. They can, that people have got the skills because they've sat an assessment to demonstrate competence. And then to conclude it, what happens as a result? Well, for me, in the example that we're doing here, this is where I start to talk about how your people have the right skills and you grow your business. So let's say it was a sales e-learning program. Because you put your people through that sales e-learning program, you're now generating increased sales, you're now generating increased revenue, you're growing your business as a result. So I've followed those 5 sections, and rather than just stating, hi, I'm Andy, I do e-learning, I've given you background context as to where it is that I'm coming from. I've demonstrated the challenge that's presented itself to you in your workplace. I'm showing you how I can resolve it. And more importantly, I'm showing you how all of that ties up at the back end as well. So it's no longer just me talking about certain factual data from my organization. Instead, what I'm doing is starting to tell you a story. I've become that storyteller. So I'm now telling you exactly sort of a world where this kind of thing happens. Remember, throughout my example I was using there, I referenced COVID in the pandemic. So that's something that has happened to people. So people understand that context, they understand the conflict that that's brought in. And I've also shown you a way in which I can overcome some of the challenges. I'm telling that full story. I'm not just stating facts that exist around my organization. So one of the things that I want to challenge you to do, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to write a story right now and talk that through with us. But one of the challenges I'd like to set for you, and certainly for you to think about as you walk away from the session this afternoon, is think about, do you actually have a story? So is there a story in place about you, your organization, your business that you could happily talk to other people about? Does it set context? Does it reference the conflict? Does it show the resolution to it? So think about what that might be for your business or organization. And then into that, we need to build that compelling reason for others to work with you, work for you and work together with you. So thinking about that partnership and network approach, what's that main reason why people should choose to support you or work with you on whatever it is that we're asking for? So please take those 2 questions away and think about those in a little bit more detail. And then the final challenge that I will set for you in this session, so that I promise I will be quiet in a moment, but this is the final bit that I like to throw out to any group that I've been working with, is whenever you attend a training session like this or you attend a workshop like this, you've absolutely got a choice the moment the session ends. You can either go and put the kettle on, choose to forget all about it and just carry on. And that's absolutely fine because we're all individuals. We can all make our own choices. But what I'd like you to challenge, what I'd like to challenge you to do is do something a little bit different. What could you do this afternoon that means that you can work more closely with your networks? What change could you make today? And if that change is just coming up with, the context of what your story might be, or asking yourself a positive what if question, then that's fine. But that's an absolute result, and you have then taken some positive action based on what we've gone through today. So take that away and think about being brave, being a bit bold, and challenging yourself to do something you wouldn't normally do this afternoon so that you can grow your network further. So that brings me to the end of what I was going to talk about. I shall stop sharing slides, and then I can see if anyone's got cameras on, I can see you properly again. But if anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask after that, or anything they'd like to discuss after that, please just fire it out. Happy to help wherever I can.
Wow, Andy, that was so interesting, especially when you talk about a number of things. I made a couple of notes here. The storytelling bit is fantastic because I think that's where I also realised that as a business, we're trying to encourage people to do things, and it's what are those things? Because you have to look at it from the learner's point of view as well.
Yeah.
So some of our learners are actually on this workshop today as well. Excellent. So when they come along to our workshops, whether it be developing their English skills, developing the IT skills, I think that's where the storytelling is really, really important, and maybe we need to do more around it. And when people come to do IT skills, why are they coming? Why do they need to improve their IT skills? And then that impacts on their motivation as well, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. I think there's a series of videos, you'll find them on YouTube, to be honest. There's an absolutely brilliant one that I'm a massive fan of, which is called Know Your Why. And it's actually, if I remember rightly, it's around Buster Douglas fighting Mike Tyson is actually what it's based on. And Douglas was the only fighter to beat Mike Tyson, having been knocked down himself in an earlier round. And it's about, what made him get up and what made him choose to do that again. And it's because his story was so compelling. He had context. He had, that in mind around, this is what this is about. This is what I'm doing it for. And this is what drives that. And it drove him to get up, and it drove him to go back out and face another 3-4 rounds and then ultimately win. And I think, that understanding your why and being able to tell that story, that's what inspires others. Giving me a range of skills is part of it. Absolutely. Just giving me information, facts, data, details around what I can do for you, then that's part of it. But when I suddenly hear a story, and when I suddenly hear, how it's going to impact me in real life, and this is the benefit, and this is what it brings, and here's a solution, that's massively more powerful for people. So yeah, no, that's great. Really good to hear that that's landed.
Yeah. And also with the storytelling, it goes back to the previous slide you did around listening. And I always tell people when I'm developing them that you have 2 ears and you have 1 mouth.
Yeah.
And you should use it in that portion as well. What we mean by that is you should do more listening than you do speaking. And so when you're speaking less, so the quality of what you say has to make more sense.
Yes.
And I suppose that's where the storytelling comes into that part as well.
It does, and that piece around context. The more we listen to others, they'll give you the context. They will tell you exactly where they are, and what they need assistance with. So what context you need to talk about in your story. So, the more we pay attention to others, the greater level of detail we've got to work with, and that'll make life so much easier. It absolutely will. I can guarantee that one. Yeah. There's very few things we can guarantee in training, but that one I can. The more you listen, greater value. Definitely.
Well, people, this certainly, I think it's been a fantastic workshop today. Communication skills and how we communicate and why we communicate is absolutely vital in that everyday life, whether it's your personal life or whether it's your business life. And I think there's just a few tips and tools that you can take away from here. Certainly, there's information here that I will be taking away. And sometimes you have to look at things like what is it you can give back? Because when you're part of a network or a part of a partnership, it's a two-way thing. It's not always giving, it's receiving. So you've got value in yourself. You're worth something. And you just sometimes have to understand that. Like I said at the beginning, I needed a plumber and I needed a printer. So when I went to my networks, I had to look for people who had those skills. So you have to understand and try and find out what your skills are. What is it you're good at? And those are the things that you need to be promoting more about yourself. So that when people are looking for that type of person, you'll be the first person hopefully that they'll come to as well. Andy, thank you very much for today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Unless there are any questions, I think Sada's made a good comment. Thank you, Andy. You are a very good storyteller. This session was very inspiring. Thank you very much. And I would agree with Sada there as well. I think it's a subject that you may not actually listen to too often because not many people talk about it. But storytelling is absolutely critical. When you're reading a newspaper, and anything you pick up around you where you've got literature, if you're reading it, it's a story.
Yeah.
Whether you're reading a post on Facebook, it's a story. Whether you're reading an email, it's a story. Whether you're looking at a post in a shop, it's a story. So it's how that story is being told. So you're absolutely right, say that. Andy is very inspiring the way he's explained it. I didn't know there were about 7 steps to storytelling either. So there's certainly some homework I'll be doing there as well.
Thank you very much. That's a great comment. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.
So unless there's any other questions, we will wrap this session up. This session is actually the very last session in our capacity building program. It's not to say we won't be putting any more sessions on. We've got some very exciting sessions that we are working on. but this was a specific program that we would do to develop the capacity. So this is the very final workshop within here. It's been absolutely fantastic for you guys spending the time, taking the time out of your busy lives to come and listen in with us. And hopefully we've inspired you, you've made some contacts, and you've learned something in the meantime as well. So if there are no further questions, we are going to end this session here. Seda, thank you very much as well for joining, and for everyone who's joined. And it's been a real pleasure working with you guys. And I know we'll be seeing you quite regularly very shortly, now that services will slowly be opening up. So thank you very much. Stay safe. And inshallah, we'll catch up with you guys very, very shortly as well. Okay?
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye all.